Welcome to the Life Stuff 101 podcast, dedicated to sharing stories and insights to inspire you to always make your mental and emotional wellness a top priority. We talk to people who share their personal journeys and experiences, as well as to people who share their professional expertise. And there'll also be other times when we share personal tips and stories, which will hopefully somehow spark that aha moment for you too. Because we all have those moments when we think, I wish I had known that earlier in life. That's what Life Stuff 101 is all about. Our discussion today is for general information purposes and not meant to be specific advice. For personalized support and specific answers to questions you may have, please consult the appropriate medical or mental health care professional. Now here's your host who's on this wild adventure ride of life just like you. And yes, a real life person who's actually slipped on a banana peel along the way. Mental wellness coach and psychotherapist, Yokoi.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Life Stuff 101. My name is Yokoi, and it's my goal to inspire you to make your mental and emotional wellness one of your top priorities, because I've learned from my own experience that the quality of my inner life directly reflects the quality of my outer life, and it's my mission to spread the word so that as many people as possible can also live the best life possible too. So today we're going to be talking about sleep. And this is also a topic that I am passionate about. We all need to sleep, but our sleep needs are individual and unique. Throughout my life, I've always thought about the importance of sleep and actually been grateful that I have always been a quote-unquote good sleeper. But when my sleep pattern and the quality of my sleep changed a couple of years ago, I came to fully understand how fortunate I was for the sound and consistent sleeper I was for most of my life. So when I reached out to Dr. Yishan Xu, who is a clinical psychologist and sleep specialist trained with the Stanford Sleep Medicine Department, and she agreed to speak with me, you can imagine I had a lot I wanted to talk to her about. She's also the founder of Mind and Body Garden Psychology in Los Altos, California, and has her very own podcast called Deep into Sleep. If you're as interested in learning more about sleep as much as I am, or even if you're not, the podcast is for you because we can all learn more about sleep. So let's jump right into today's discussion with Dr. Yishan Xu. So hello, Yishan. I've really been enjoying your Deep in Sleep podcast. And for myself, being someone who has a very deep interest in sleep, I've been finding each of your episodes fascinating. So thank you so much and congratulations on the launch of your podcast.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me today.
Great. And just before we dive into our conversation, I'd like to invite my guests to share a fun fact. What's a fun fact you can share with us today?
That's a very interesting question, actually. I often see myself as a foodie, but also because I grew up in China, so a foodie in China can be quite wild. So the most weird thing I ever ate was fried scorpio. It's actually a whole bowl of them handed by my mom because, of course, she think it was too scary to eat herself. So she cooked them and hand to me, say, hey, here are yours. Don't waste them.
Can I ask, what did they taste like?
Actually, I think she fried them too much. They just... super pokey in my mouth that I could not even taste much of the scorpio itself.
You probably felt the sharp bits in your mouth instead of anything to taste from them, I guess.
Yes.
That's really awesome. The one thing that I noticed is that your clinic is named the Mind Body Garden Psychology Clinic. And you mentioned on your website that you think about the role of psychologists as like being a gardener. Can you please talk more about that?
Yeah, definitely. I start forming these ideas over the years of clinical experience because I often see everyone is so unique and we all have our own strengths and weakness. So like each of us, we are different type of trees or plants. We can either be an apple tree or orange tree. So as psychologists, when we see a client, we want to find out what is unique about this person, what's this person's strengths, how we can empower this person to get this strength out. And that is like a gardener. We are trimming the tree, but we are not changing an orange tree to an apple tree. So I feel like we are not changing a person who they are, but we are helping them to cut off those extra parts to help them to be healthier. So whatever, those extra branch won't get in the way of their own life.
Yeah, I think that's such a lovely analogy, and the link between a garden and the organic nature of our minds and who we are. And just as a garden can get overgrown and it's best when someone is minding and carefully tending to it, I think that's really similar. That could be said for our minds as well. So I think that's really lovely.
Yeah, thank you. That's how I approach my clinical work.
And so specifically in regards to minding and caring for our mental health, in your experience, how does sleep and also, I guess, sleep quality play a role?
Yeah, I often think sleep quality plays a big role in our health in general, especially mental health. As we all know, if we don't get enough sleep, which is sleep deprivation, for example, or sleep loss, if we don't sleep enough that our body and mind needs, then we will experience a lot of difficulties in our life, like concentration, our memories, our daily functioning, our fatigue level. And then, of course, we won't be able to feel happy, or we won't be able to do what we can do. And then we're going to doubt ourselves or even have conflict with family members, coworkers. I know I talked to another sleep doctor. He lashed out to his children sometime when he loses a lot of sleep, and he would apologize later and try to really take care of his own sleep. So that's about sleep loss. But another note, sleep loss and insomnia are also different. If we have some kind of sleep disorders like insomnia, that means we are not able to fall asleep. Then a lot of people with insomnia tend to be more irritable, feel really anxious about sleep all day long, and really worry about what sleep can harm, how sleep can harm their own health. And when we are constantly thinking about that in our mind, we are cognitively occupied. So we are not able to have enough space, mental capacity to process other things efficiently.
I'm curious to know how you would define, I guess, clinically insomnia.
Clinically, insomnia is either you experience difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, or you wake up far too early in the morning than you expected and you have difficulties falling back asleep. And in order to be diagnosed with insomnia, you need to experience these symptoms for quite often for a while, like at least 3 times per week for over 3 months.
And what would be the difference then between insomnia and, say, sleep deprivation?
Yeah. Oh, first, I just want to add one more thing about the diagnosis. To be diagnosed with insomnia, you have to, like, these symptoms has to impact your life to make you feel overwhelmed, exhausted, you're not happy about the symptom. For people who experience similar symptoms, but if they're totally okay, they're like, fine, I cannot sleep some nights frequently, I'm totally okay with it, then they don't have insomnia. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay.
So the difference between sleep loss and the insomnia actually is quite interesting. So a lot of people think they are the same thing. They are not. Insomnia is you try to give yourself opportunity to sleep, but you are not able to sleep. So a lot of people go to the bed early, get up late to spend more time on bed, being awake, but just cannot fall asleep. That's insomnia. So you basically lose the ability to sleep. And sleep loss is you don't give yourself enough opportunity to sleep. Like I know a lot of people have really a lot of big workload. They are high achievers. They are anxious about work. So they would work a lot, or they have young children at home, so the children cries at night, so they lose sleep that way. So they really want to sleep and they can fall asleep, but they don't have the opportunity to sleep, and that causes sleep loss.
And would sleep loss and sleep deprivation be interchangeable mostly?
Mostly, yeah, I think in the field we use the word interchangeably, but some doctors prefer one way or the other.
And when it comes to sleep loss or sleep deprivation, it wouldn't necessarily be considered a disorder then.
No, it's not really up to a disorder, but sleep deprivation or sleep loss can cause or can be related to much more health consequences than insomnia. So if we really don't give ourselves enough opportunity to sleep, our body really needs the sleep, then that is related to a lot of like heart disease, cognitive functioning problems, and hypertension. All this like can be even severe obesity, severe health or mental health consequences. And sleep loss definitely can make depression worse, bipolar disorder worse, can make a lot of like existing mental condition worse. But insomnia does not. So if we have insomnia, so far the literature only can point out one established connection between insomnia and hypertension. But other than that, there's no established link between insomnia and other negative health consequences.
I see. And when it comes to specifically mental health and sleep and the connection between them, I realize that when it comes to sleep disorders, there are many of them. I think that in one of your podcast episodes, you mentioned that there's 70 different kinds of sleep disorders specifically. And then there are other things that are related to it, like you mentioned, like sleep loss or sleep deprivation, which isn't necessarily a disorder, but there's so many different variables and ways of thinking about sleep or challenges with sleep. But I was just curious around the idea of, I guess, like the sleep deprivation piece, because I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people have different stressors in their lives. And as a result of that, may find that they're either cutting their sleep short intentionally, or that circumstances mean that they're not getting maybe as much sleep as they would like. And I was listening very recently to a podcast featuring a guy named Dr. Zach Bush, who's an endocrinologist. And he was talking about how any of us at any given time could tip into mental difficulties. And one of the things that he had mentioned is that maybe lacking in sleep for 48 or 72 hours or something like that could trigger an adverse mental health episode. I know that he wasn't talking very specifically or clinically about it, but do you think that there's truth to that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth about that, especially what we call sleep debt. Nowadays, we all have. So as adults or children also, we have a lot on our plates. We have a lot to work on. And a lot of us actually are having sleep debt built up from day to day. So a lot of time you will see people think, oh, they want to sleep in during the weekend to really pay back the sleep debt. But the sleep debt cannot be really paid back, unfortunately, or only to a small portion, to a small certain level. So if we really deprive our sleep to like 48 hour up to 72 hours, all that can cause a lot of problems. In the history of sleep science, there were a lot of experiments for people to come into labs or stay in their own home to purposely deprive them their own sleep. And that came with a lot of consequences. To a certain point, I think scientists started realizing the harm of that, and they stopped those kind of experiment.
Yeah, and well, you mentioned that sleep debt isn't something that you could make up or only to a certain degree. If people do find that they're in a debt when it comes to sleep, what would be the way of maybe getting to more of a norm or a status then? Or is it just about getting into a better sleep pattern?
Yeah, I think we just have to be more mindful because a lot of time, if we can change our mindset about how we view sleep, how we view health and work and other responsibilities we have in life, we have the choice and the power to make some adjustment. If we have sleep debt, yes, we can take a nap the next day. The quicker we try to make up the sleep, we can get a little bit back, but the long-term harm still going to be there. So the most sustainable and healthier way is for us to really prioritize sleep. For a lot of people, they prioritize everything else over sleep. So I often hear people say, well, when I get busy, sleep is the first thing to go. It's easy, right? We can just stay up late because this work is so important. But when we do that, we don't realize what's the long-term harm it does to our body. So I think the root is we have to think about, understand sleep better and start prioritizing sleep. And when we think, okay, this thing is important, but my sleep is even more important. So how I can push myself to work up to, let's say, 11 o'clock. I have to shut down my computer and get my sleep. And tomorrow, actually, I'm possibly going to be more productive to work on that, even if I have to get up like 1 hour early or something. That way, you actually can be less procrastinating before bedtime, or else who knows what we are doing. And if we think the sleep can be eaten up like without limit.
hmm And it's so true. I feel, at least maybe just from my personal experience and perspective, perhaps that people do think about sleep as something that they could just maybe not casually, but to make certain decisions on, that it's almost one of the first things that maybe people decide to sacrifice in relation to other things in their lives. And I think like most of us often talk about things in like larger terms and broader terms. And I think that we certainly do that with sleep. And sleep is something that we all need and we all have to do. And we can talk about it from the standpoint of I slept well, or I didn't sleep well, or I had X hours of sleep. But I'm curious to know, what are the ways in which you think about sleep, do you think, in ways maybe most people might not?
Mm-hmm. So I think because I know a lot more sleep science, so the knowledge behind sleep, so I have slightly different ideas about what a normal sleep look like.
Mm-hmm.
Because so actually most of us have some misperceptions about sleep. We may think, well, traditionally, that's how I thought too. If we fall asleep, good sleep is we close our eyes, we can fall asleep quickly. We open our eyes in the morning, feel fresh and then refreshed. So we had a really good night of sleep. But in reality, none of our sleep look like that. If we connect to an EEG machine, we do a sleep study, we will find out our sleep look quite different. Our sleep have different stage. So a healthy sleep involves several things. First, we have to have all the stage of sleeps to a certain percentage per night to make it a whole healthy sleep architecture to form a healthy sleep. For example, we all have like 10 to 15% deep sleep, about 20% REM sleep, and other light stage of sleeps for other parts of the night. And per night, we all wake up on average 10 to 12 times per night. And those are all part of the normal sleep. And in the morning when we wake up, we rarely feel refreshed. Or I would say in the morning, the moment we wake up, use that feeling, how we feel at that moment to judge how we slept the night before is very wrong. In the moment we open our eyes, our brain is still rotating and transitioning from sleep to wakefulness, and that needs some time. So actually for most people, most time, when we wake up in the morning, for a period of time, we felt very sleepy and groggy and not very clear-minded, and that's very normal.
Yeah, and I understand that when it comes to the idea of good sleep, it be individual and unique to everyone. From your experience, is there something that could be helpful for all of us to keep in mind when it comes to getting good sleep?
hmm I think the most important thing is first, I want to say yes, definitely sleep looks very unique for everyone. The architecture is general rule, but everyone's habits, sleep patterns slightly look different. So the most important thing is for us to have an easy mind about sleep. Don't get too caught up with how we sleep. Don't judge our sleep too much to think about, oh, did I slept well last night? Did I sleep poorly? What that can do to me? Kind of like we really need to trust our body. Trust our body that we actually are able to sleep well. Our body actually knows how to get enough sleep it needs to make sure we can function. So if we can trust our body, knows, oh, if I don't feel like I slept well last night, I can still function today. I will be fine and I will sleep better other nights. Those kind of thought can really help us to be more relaxed, less anxious. I think that's the key for having a good night of sleep.
I love that approach, that idea of trusting ourselves, trusting our innate systems or like who we are as human beings, that there's so much of how, I don't know, like we're constructed or we're built or we are, that
hmm
we naturally, our bodies naturally know how to take care of us or how to function most optimally. And I think also many of us, especially those of us who have an interest in bettering ourselves or being into personal optimization, like that kind of thing, there can be a big focus on using things like sleep trackers and maybe getting too deep into data. But clinicians such as yourself, and this is something that I listened to in one of your episodes recently, we're seeing like a corresponding phenomena that's been emerging in relation to things like sleep trackers. Can you please talk more about that?
Yeah, definitely. Because I treat insomnia clinically, I definitely see a lot of patients come in wearing those trackers. And it's interesting, they would comment on their sleep. They first monitor the sleep too much. They would check it every morning, every night to see, well, how did I do? And then gets more anxious about sleep if that data does not show something ideal as what they imagined. But the problem for trackers are first, they are not very accurate. Second, I think people have misinterpretation of the data. For example, a lot of people would come in and say, I only slept, my deep sleep was only, 20 minutes or 30 minutes or up to 1 hour. I did not have enough deep sleep, which was wrong. If you have half an hour to 1 hour deep sleep, that's possibly okay. For some people, they do have more, some people have less, and that could still be within the normal range. And for some people, they think, oh, I dream too much. That's also not true. So I think when we monitor that too much, I really witness it get in the way of sleep struggles such as insomnia, because people want to use the tracker to control their sleep. So they use the data to go back to say, tonight I have to try to fall asleep faster. Tonight I have to make sure I have more deep sleep. But the fact is none of us can control sleep. Even I'm in the field, I know sleep so well. I cannot control my own sleep, right? I still
Mm.
have nights here and there. I cannot sleep well. So for people who use the tracker, so that cause more subtype of insomnia because they're too perfectionism. They really want to control their sleep and then got frustrated. No matter how hard they try, their sleep won't look exactly the same way as they imagined, and they won't let it go. So that just causes more and more problem. So when I treat insomnia, sometimes depends on the patient. I would encourage some of them to just not wear the sleep trackers at all during the course of treatment. And sometimes that's really helpful.
Do you see ways in which sleep trackers are helpful?
Yes, Sleep trackers can be quite helpful if we have a more relaxed mindset about sleep. So it's very helpful for us to understand like our daily activities, understand all like my overall sleep, what that may look like, how many hours I slept. But I also, if I'm okay with that, I kind of understand, I'm just curious, but I'm not overly using the data to guide my own sleep, then that's totally okay. Like I used to wear a tracker sometime. I would look at that and just be curious, and I don't go into the detail. But that keep me on track to know, oh, I possibly work too late last night. I say I did not like go to bed early enough, and I did not leave enough opportunities for myself to sleep. So that helped me to be more cautious about my own sleep habit. And that's helpful in that way to make sure I prioritize my sleep to try to balance my work and sleep. That's actually quite helpful. I also know someone, I think I interviewed him in my podcast also. They also wear trackers, but they are adjusting their whole lifestyle, like nutrition, exercise, and sleep. So they use the trackers to monitor their progress, and they can see something slightly changing in their sleep, and to know that they are making some progress in their health overall. That could be also helpful.
I wonder, from your experience, if you know of any maybe resources that people can access in relation to maybe having maybe a better relationship with their sleep tracker or the data they get from their sleep tracker. Because I guess how I'm just thinking about it now is that a lot of the products that are available for sleep tracking, it's almost like they're promoting for people to get deep into the data,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
it feels like what you're talking about and how you're thinking about how the data could be helpful is something that everybody who is interested in maybe tracking sleep or learning more about their sleep, it feels much more, I don't know, holistic or better. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about that, I know there used to be some like Chinese tracker really awful I use because they don't tell you, well, you can see the structure picture. But what they tell you is, oh, you sleep worse than how many percent of other people. So they just throw this data to you and make you feel awful about your own sleep without knowing more details, right? So just compare you with the data they collected. That's, I think, very irresponsible. I think some good resources, I have them on my website also, is I think National Sleep Foundation. They have really good website. They have multiple articles. There's some interviews about doctors talking about, well, how much deep sleep we need, how much REM sleep we need, to just help people understand the basic sleep structure. That can help us to read the data better. But I'm not aware of any article yet directly talking about how to use sleep tracking those data more in a healthier way. I will have to dig around to see whether some doctors wrote something about that.
In some ways, I feel as though maybe it's still in the stage of people, maybe like early adopters or maybe people further along who is very interested in this kind of data. But I can also see, like you had just mentioned, especially in the way that some of these products are designed, that they do, these companies, I would imagine maybe, is they want you to make sense of the data that you're getting from the trackers and to, I guess, because the idea is to optimize or to better or whatever it is. But if they're not, or the products or the companies aren't providing the approach to, it's like, this is data and this is a way that you can look at it, but don't compare or don't put too much emphasis or meaning into the data that you're getting. Because that's what I'm getting a sense of learning from you, like talking to you about that today.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So I have actually a specific question, or maybe not so specific, but a question around the quantity of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I understand that sleep is something unique and individual to everybody, but is there a range, I guess, that's considered to be a good amount of sleep?
Yes, it's very individual. A lot of doctors, literatures will say mostly we would say 7 to 8 hours are very common like recommendations for people. But we have to realize there are a lot of individual variabilities around it. For some people, their body just need 5 to 6 hours. For some people, they do need 9 to 10 hours. So I think again, it's very important for us to listen to our body, to understand to how much our body really needs and what that may look like. Not just because, the successful people, they only sleep 5 hours per day, they get up what time, then I have to be that in order to copy their success. Not necessarily that. We have to understand our own circadian rhythm to understand whether we are night owl, we are early bird, or we are in the middle. To understand that, to find the right time to sleep and get up, and to understand how many hours our body really needs to be able to function well.
How would you recommend that someone does get an understanding of what that optimal amount of time would be?
Yeah, so that's actually interesting. A lot of time, I would say for people without insomnia, a lot of times they do have idea, like weekly, we do have idea when we feel sleepy, right? And 11 or 12 for some people is 1 or 2. We feel sleepy, and if we go to bed around the time we feel sleepy, naturally, ideally, when we want to wake up and feel great, if we don't need go to work, we don't need alarm clock, that is a good way to experiment around it to help us understand. But when I see people with insomnia, the fun thing is they come in, they always give me a quantity, like how many hours they want to, their goal of sleep, that they want to get out of the treatment.
Mm.
So often they will say, I want 9 hours sleep or 8 hours sleep. That's how many hours my body needs to function. And then if I ask them, well, how often, like when was the last time you slept 9 hours day after day for a while consistently? And interestingly, some of them may say never. It's really just the idea in
Right.
their mind that, I think my body really needs that to function. But we have to be able to distinguish between perception and reality. So a lot of time in reality, really how much your body needs. When you fall asleep and naturally wake up, cannot sleep anymore, that's the length. If you do that consistently day after day, or for most of the days, then that's possibly the length your body needs.
I guess I just am personally curious. Is there a clinical way of getting that kind of a measurement, do you think?
I think normally it's through sleep diary.
Mm.
So that's a subjective tool
Mhm.
to ask people based on their memory to jog down what their sleep looked like last night. Like when did they went to bed, when you turned the light off, ready to fall asleep, how many minutes you think it may took you to fall asleep. It's all guessing. No need to look at the clock or anything. And then how long you think you slept, when did you wake up this morning, when did you finally left your bed. So if you keep that log for several weeks, you possibly have a good idea
Mm.
about the sleep windows.
And I think that's such an important point. And just to also reference something that you said a little bit earlier about maybe people who are high functioning, so-called high functioning individuals, or people who are very visible in the public eye, who talk about how they say it's like, I only need 4 hours of sleep every night. And it talks about it almost as a point of pride, as though everybody who would be quote unquote successful would not be getting any sleep. It almost like as though it's advice or some kind of a tip or something like that, and how potentially dangerous almost that is, that kind of messaging is being put out from some people.
Right, because that's definitely for people who need more sleep. If they force themselves to do that, then they will lose their sleep, right? That's the sleep deprivation we talk about. That's just going to cause more problems than really helping us to be successful. So we want to balance between how to better self-care and like get enough sleep versus to pursue the kind of success that we want in a healthy direction.
And just to take a little bit of a detour here, and since I have the opportunity to speak to you, personally speaking, I've always been a huge fan of sleep. I love sleeping. And I would say the majority of my life, I've been what I consider to be a good sleeper. I've never really had to worry about my quality of sleep and how much time I slept and so forth. I felt as though it felt very qualitative, like it felt my relationship with sleep felt very good. But a few years ago, I noticed that how I sleep and that quality of sleep changed drastically. And the thing that I have been now experimenting with is trying to figure out how I can not necessarily get back to, because I kind of don't think that things are just about going back to things, but I would like to have a better quality sleep than I have in the last few years. And the two things that I've been able to, or at least what I've identified, is, I guess, curiosity around whether age and change in nutrition would have a big impact on quality of sleep.
Yeah, definitely. I see that often in my clinic is some people come in saying, oh, I used to sleep like this. Can you help me just to, sleep as well? For some people, they're more reasonable as you. They will say, just want to improve the sleep quality. But for some people, they really fixed-minded, want to go back to the old time. But the thing is, as we age, a lot of things change, especially sleep. So young babies or even children, they need a lot more hours of sleep per day than adults. So the length of the sleep our body needs definitely decreases when we age. Also, the sleep architecture changes. So when we get older, our sleep has less deep sleep, and we tend to have more awakenings at night, and sometimes take us a little bit longer to fall asleep, to stay asleep. So there's a very nice chart, I think, in the website of National Sleep Foundation, that created by a lot of top sleep physicians in the nation. So use a big data that shows very clearly when we age, a lot of things been changing. So we need to really change our ideas about sleep along with our age. So our expectation about what a good sleep is, what a high quality of sleep is, need to change as we get older.
And I feel like that's something that in some ways, somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew that sleep changes, based on age and so forth. And so as I'm experiencing it now, it is something that I want to learn more about for myself because my sleep is changing as I get older. The other thing that changed for me, or what I see, I've correlated, and I don't necessarily know that there is a correlation, but I was on a very strict low carb diet or way of eating for a little while. And I found that after a few months of that specific way of eating, that is when I really noticed my sleep, or the quality of my sleep being affected. Do you have any insights about nutrition and sleep and how they work together or not work together?
Yeah, they definitely work together, but I'm not an expert in the nutrition and sleep interaction in more details. But I do know in the sleep field, what you put in your body, what kind of diet or eating habit you have definitely impact your sleep. So even though I don't know the detailed which type of diet works better for sleep, what I know is the timing of the eating and frequency, like how consistent you eat and when you eat, especially at night, in the morning, that closely related to sleep. Like night owls, they don't feel hungry in the early morning when they wake up. And if you eat too late, too close to bedtime, that will interfere with your sleep, along with what you eat or drink, like caffeine, alcohol, all those things definitely have different impact to our sleep. But I do know recently there's research about cherry juice. Some kind of cherry juice at night can actually help improve sleep quality or help to improve some aspect of sleep. I think there's a research paper coming out about that.
Oh, cool.
So definitely they are related. And I also heard a lot of stories about people changing their diet, changing their like eating style, and they do found their sleep somehow improves and they felt like they sleep better or their sleep quality gets better. If they use a tracker, they do notice after a while by trying a new type of diet, their sleep architecture also changes. So I believe they are closely related.
And I think just as we were just talking about how sleep is individual and unique thing to an individual, I would imagine that nutrition would be similar. And as you said, it's not something that you can specifically speak to, but I'm sure it's all in some ways all related.
Yeah, I think it's very similar with our relationship with food. It's just like our relationship with sleep. It's an individual thing. We need to know what our body likes, what works for our body, what does not work for our body. I actually interviewed someone who is a vegan in my show, which will be released very soon. So talk about the relationship between food, sleep, health, mental health, everything. So that was also interesting experience for me to listen to those.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to listening to that episode. And I know that, again, like you mentioned, that nutrition isn't necessarily an area that you can specifically speak to. But do you have any insights around alcohol and sleep? Because I know that a lot of people, when they have difficulties maybe sleeping, or at least it's my sense, is that they'll use alcohol or drink alcohol and to maybe get to sleep and so forth. But I'm wondering about that in relation to quality of sleep.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So a lot of us think, well, if we drink alcohol like at night, that help with sleep. I often hear that. So in a way, that's right. If we drink alcohol too close to bedtime, it helps us fall asleep faster because it numb our nerve system. It does kind of like knock us down in a way. But halfway through the night, after our body digests the liquor in our body, and it breaks down into different things, and those are actually very harmful for our sleep quality. So a lot of time, if we drink alcohol before bedtime, our sleep quality suffers. So in the morning, we may not feel good. And we may, at night, we don't have enough REM sleep. We may not have enough deep sleep because of alcohol. So overall, we don't sleep as well on the nights we drink alcohol.
Yeah, because I often do hear people leaning into or using alcohol in order to sleep, but like you say, that it might help to get someone to sleep. But in terms of the impact physically or physiologically on the body, but also the quality of sleep is often jeopardized. So it's not necessarily maybe a good thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like using, sleep medication. You are using something external to control the sleep because, I need to knock myself down. I need to fall asleep quicker. And then I don't care what happened at night. So that's not right. What is most important is sleep quality, I would say. Not how long you sleep, it's not how fast you fall asleep. It's the quality of the whole night of sleep really matters to our health. So I don't think that's a good idea to use alcohol as a goal, as a method to put ourselves into sleep.
And I think that's such an important point for us to consider sleep from the quality perspective, not just getting to sleep. That just because we're feeling as though we need to get to sleep or be able to sleep, that rather than to focus on just being able to sleep, that if we were to think more holistically or more, maybe in a larger sense of how do we actually figure out how to get better sleep or better quality sleep. And that would be definitely, I think, a conversation that requires more, like that we should all be having more of a discussion around that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, for someone who is concerned or suspects that they either have a sleep disorder or difficulties with sleep, where and how would you recommend that someone seek out appropriate help?
Yeah. So I think if anyone struggles with some kind of sleep, I would recommend them to go to a sleep specialist or at least go to the primary care doctor, talk about their concerns about sleep and the wish to see a sleep specialist, see whether there's any recommendations. Unfortunately, in the field, there's a gap between common like training in sleep. So some primary care doctors may not have enough training on sleep. I definitely recommend to get to a sleep specialist to really do the necessary checkup and to get the necessary diagnosis and appropriate treatment. For insomnia, sometimes a sleep specialist will refer them to a sleep psychologist for CBT for insomnia treatment, for example. And as necessary, sometimes there will be medication prescribed. But there are a lot of online resources. I think I'm still putting them on my website. The more I know, I always put new ones in. There are some websites help us to find like a certified sleep psychologist in America. There's a website you can go there to find the people who deliver CBT for insomnia if you have insomnia. There are also the Sleep Foundation website I talk about. They have a lot of great articles to help people understand. When we do research, we can understand, oh, do I suspect this something? And then go to the sleep centers to get to be checked by a doctor. If we have other sleep disorders or concerns, if we need sleep study, there's also a website I think I put on is you can find a certified sleep center to do a overnight sleep study to figure out more whether you have like sleep breathing disorder or other type of sleep disorders. So there are definitely a lot of resources, but I would say seeing like sleep aware, like specially trained provider in the sleep science field would be very helpful.
Because I could also imagine that a primary care physician who is maybe not as versed as they could be around sleep could maybe just prescribe medication or something like that rather than to refer out to a specialist. And I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. It's something that I'm imagining. But for a person who is for themselves experiencing difficulties with sleep or suspect that they may have a sleep disorder, to educate themselves, I think it's important for us maybe as individuals to educate ourselves. And if we are in need of support or help, to think about it as it's best for us to be able to consult with a sleep specialist.
Yes, I think that's a good first step. I definitely see some people got misdiagnosed, got delayed by providers that has no knowledge about sleep. Because if they don't have the knowledge about sleep, a lot of problems will be considered as other problems. Like I saw some people with narcolepsy, they were misdiagnosed as mental health disorders. Yeah, so end up transferring to a psychiatrist, medication management, nothing got improved. So sometimes the family has to educate themselves to find the right answer or right provider to double check. Yeah, so it's kind of tricky, but hopefully by our effort educating the public, everyone will know more about sleep, at least to have the reasonable suspicion and then go to a sleep specialist to find more like accurate answers.
And would you say that that is one of the reasons why you were inspired to start your podcast, Deep into Sleep?
Yeah, definitely. As I studied sleep medicine in Stanford Sleep Center, I noticed actually, just like myself, I was a professionally trained psychologist that I knew so little, so few about sleep before I entered the sleep center. So when I was there studying, I was just constantly shocked that how much I don't know about sleep. Even today, I feel like there's still so much more I don't know about sleep. And if as a professional, I don't know, and I also see a lot of doctors, they don't know, then how about the public? So I really want to send the wonderful information I learned out to the public, to the general audience, or to different professionals working in different fields, just to help us understand what sleep is, what sleep disorders may involve. It's funny that even like my roommates, I have some roommates right now, they don't listen to my podcast, but just by myself talking about sleep, and they already very have some ideas about that. So one day one roommate said he went to work, his coworker talking about himself snoring. So my roommate asked him, "Do you have sleep apnea?" And his coworker said, "Oh yeah, how do you know?" Yeah, so I think just sending out this message out, help people listen to it, is really helpful.
Well, the one thing I have to say is that your roommates need to get on your podcast. Like what I mean by that is that listen to it, because it is something I've learned so much from it. So thank you so much for doing that. And again, thank you so much for your time today, Shan. I really appreciate it. And just to round our time off today, I just have a few more questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So I was wondering if there's a book, a go-to book or a resource that you could recommend for people.
Yeah, there are actually several good books. I had a blog post on my website. I interviewed two of the book authors recently. One is The Sleep Solution by Dr. Chris Winter. I met with him in the World Sleep Conference and interviewed him. And that book is very nicely written and very funny to read, I would say. Talk about all aspects of about especially insomnia and how we can improve quality of sleep, including like adults and parents, how to deal with children, those kind of aspects, which is really cool. The other one, if we want to know more about other type of disorders, sleep disorders, I recommend reading the book from Dr. Guy Leschner, who I just interviewed. His book, The Nocturnal Brain, has a lot of fascinating cases, clinical cases, like across different sleep disorders to help us understand more what's out there, what they look like. That's good, like easy read education materials.
That's great. And as you'd mentioned, there's so much already that you have looked into and know about sleep, but there's so much more you mentioned that there is to know about it, but not necessarily just in the area of sleep. But what would you say is something that you'd wished you learned earlier in life or had been taught in school or something like that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that sometime also. I feel like when I was learning, but maybe that's also a normal stage of development, that when we learn something, we are so focused on the details of one thing. We could not see a whole picture. That's why now, after all these years of training within or outside of sleep, I realized the connection between our mind, between our body, is actually all together. It's a whole system that when we look into a problem, when we look into our health, we really need to incorporate all like different aspects, not just nutrition, not just sleep, but it's different things together. So I think like I wish I had known it earlier to look from that angle, but also how could I, right?
Exactly. But it's so true that to think about things like systemically as who we are, that we're not just isolated things or individual aspects, that there are so many different things that are working together. It's part of a system. And it's something that I came to later in life as well, that I'm thankful that I now know for sure. And thank you again so much for your time today, Shan. I really feel like I can endlessly ask you questions about you and your practice and sleep. So I do really appreciate speaking to you today. But I also do very much want to thank you for the important work that you're doing in treating sleep disorders, I think specifically insomnia, and sharing your knowledge through your podcast, because I think that it's a very important thing that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Yeah, I just enjoy sharing what I learned to everyone. Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you again. So very lastly, where can we direct folks to find out more about you?
Yeah, definitely. So for my podcast and the sleep, I have a website called deepintosleep.co. People can find the resources I mentioned there and the books, the websites I recommended, and my podcast there. If people want to find me for treatment for insomnia, they can go to my practice. That's what we talked about at the beginning of the show, mindbodygarden.com. There, people can find me for consultation for treatment.
Super. Thank you again, Yishan.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation I had with Yishan as much as I did, and that you learned a thing or two about sleep that you didn't know about, because I know I certainly did. And if you'd like to learn more about sleep and her work, please do check out her podcast, Deep Into Sleep, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also learn more about Yishan's work and clinic at mindbodygarden.com. I'm really so grateful to have these opportunities to connect and to learn from these amazing folks about our mental and emotional wellness. And thank you for listening so that I can keep bringing more of these conversations to you. You can get access to detailed show notes for each episode at lifestuff101.com. And if you'd be so inclined, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I hope you have a lovely day or evening wherever you are in the world. And I'll be speaking to you again real soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Life Stuff 101. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you'll be among the first to be notified when new episodes are released. Always be sure to check out lifestuff101.com for show notes and to be a member of Mio's Miracle Mob. Because as the wise modern-day philosopher John Bon Jovi once said, miracles happen every day. Change your perception of what a miracle is, and you'll see them all around you.